Hey, thanks everyone. Welcome to the third episode of the Impact of AI Explored. This week we have Ryan Mangan. Ryan is the founder of the company Efficient Ether, and we're going to talk a little bit about LLMs and hallucinations. Ryan, how are you?
Good, thank you, and thanks for having me on, James. Is it good on? Appreciate that very much so, and looking forward to our chat on LLMs as always.
Yes, the fun things they are. Okay, so as usual, we're going to get kicked off with a couple of kind of news stories that have been going about. So, Gurjan, do you want to get us started for this episode?
Yeah, so what's the first thing that comes to mind is I read recently that there's a legislation passed in Europe that allows Tesla to use full self-drive, so autonomous drive. So I'm very excited to see how that goes and how that falls into every EU regulation, every country, what they're going to think about Teslas and us driving only sitting on the back seat, driving fully autonomous. And I know you love Teslas, James, so I'm really curious to see what you think about that.
It's not. It's self-driving, which is my main thing. I just don't believe in it. I'm a complete skeptic when it comes to self-driving. I've seen so many bad videos where the cars and like it's all about the decision making of who is the car going to damage more, the person it hits, the vehicle it hits. I've seen ones where the car just took over and nearly killed the passenger. It's like I'm still skeptical. I'm interested to see where it goes. Given EU regulation, it's not going to be something that comes out today or tomorrow. This is years that will require going through the full NCAP tests and everything. You know, there's so many different variations and variables to this. So, yeah, it's an interesting development, but as I said, it won't be anything that's going to be available in the next year. What do you think, Ryan?
No,
Yeah, I mean, I think the phrase is control freak, is it, James? Where you want to be in control of the vehicle and not let someone else do it. I'm the same. I wouldn't really put my life in the hands of technology. I'm sure most people wouldn't. But like you're talking about 5, 10 years for this sort of regulation to be approved and tested, and then um, the issues which come out when it's first released. I mean, taking them chances is something a lot of people would probably take a second glance at rather than just jumping into the passenger seat and not the driver's seat, as it were.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You know, if you think of any software, who buys a V1 version of any software? No.
As it's
So
free. Yeah.
if it's free, I'll test it. But yeah, yeah. When it comes to cars and my safety, no, I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
I'm going to sit back and watch this one from afar, and I'll see when other car makers maybe look at it. But at the moment, I'm not even. You know, I like the concept. You know, you could go. But and the whole, I think it opens up a wider discussion about where we're going with car ownership, and you know, are we going to get to the stage where nobody actually owns a car? You basically have an app on your phone, you click a button, and then a car just comes and picks you up. So I think yeah, that's where, you know, I suppose the nirvana to get to is where nobody owns a car. It is just a warehouse somewhere, and a fleet of these things just go out all over the place. But yeah, it's early days, but let's watch this space. I suppose is my view.
yeah, let's see what happens. Maybe the
Yeah.
iRobot future, where you just summon a car and then it drives in front of you, and then it gets you there, and then you get out and it drives away. It would be
Hey,
nice,
if it looks
maybe
like the
not for
cars in
everyone.
iRobot, I'll have one of them. They were
Yeah,
awesome looking,
Minus the
and just
robot shooting at you, right?
yeah.
apart from the robot, yeah, I just yeah, don't need the robot trying to kill me or anything like that. So I suppose you're John. The other big thing that's been going on, and it's still ongoing, is obviously Nvidia, the biggest company on the planet at the moment, especially when it comes to AI. They did a bunch of announcements yesterday, and I think you had a look at some of them. So do you want to break down some of those announcements from yesterday?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. And James, the Nvidia has been bombarding us with a lot of great news, a lot of great things. One of the greatest things they released is the new Blackwell chips. So those are chips that are the next generation of AI chips, and they are massive in scale. How much they can process, how much information they can hold, how quick they can work. And we should have asked Johan about this. as he's more into hardware stuff, but or guest from last month. But it's really it says 4 times of trading.
Ju- just on the chips. Yeah, no, just on the chips. Am I right in saying that Microsoft and Google have already signed up for utilizing them on Azure and
Well, I'm not
GCP?
sure, but I can imagine they have because they say it's 4 times faster and it can hold 30 times more, 4 times faster training, 30 times
Hmm.
performance improvement. So that's massive. So I don't know what they did, but they built it massively better
Mm.
than they had. So it's really cool. And well, and of the
Yep.
other things that I don't know if you looked at there is a video, a YouTube of Project Groot, where they build robots built on Jetsons. You saw that, Ryan?
Yeah,
Jetsons are those small itty bitty things, and they build a
yeah, I
complete
did.
robot
Yeah,
that drives and talks and interacts with you. That's really cool.
it was doing the food shopping thing, wasn't it? It was taking food off the table and then putting it into the basket and then picking the basket up and moving the basket um, on instruction. Obviously, I don't know. Again, we're going about trust issues. I don't know how much I trust that in the house,
Yeah,
but
that was the
it's definitely coming
OpenAI
along.
integration they have with the company, but Nvidia had the small Jetson robots driving around on stage, a lot more like the R2D2 stuff. They showed that in the keynote yesterday, and it was really cool to see that they can build so much
Yeah, that was
intelligence
yesterday.
in such a small thing in the real-time performance. But the thing you were saying about OpenAI, and they build a robot that talks to you in a normal human voice, and they can say, "Can you give me something to eat?" And it gives you an apple, just doing the physical stuff. That's incredible.
Yeah, there's yeah, it's they're kind of like competing on the same, aren't they? Has anybody seen that AI pin as well? Where I forgot the name of it now. It's quite a clever name. Uh,
Humana.
yeah, that's the one, yeah, where you put your hand out, and that is just something else as well. Again, it's not something I would really want because I'd probably end up walking to a lamppost. But the idea is quite a good idea, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Apart from the worst launch video I've ever seen in my entire life, and those people were not humans; they were AI generated. I'm sorry, that was just atrocious. It's just like, here's this really cool piece of technology, and we'll just get the most wooden people in the world to present it to you. It was just so bad, and the amount of tweets about it and discussion I saw about it, how bad that video was. It doesn't matter about the device because the launch had to be a complete failure because that thing was just a car crash from minute one.
Tech is cool.
Have you seen
The
it?
tech is cool.
Huh?
What it can do is cool, but
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, the tech is cool, but the oh my god, the execution of the whoever's in charge of marketing,
We
oh my
can
god.
we can tell you work in tech marketing, James. That's all I can say.
Watch it, you. Seriously. Right. Anyway, so there's been rumors that ChatGPT 4.5 has been leaked.
yeah,
Grajan,
yeah.
you were looking into this, I think.
I read online that the short snippet on GitHub about the next version that it's offline very quick, but online it stays online. So it says that the GPT 4.5 Turbo is a new model that surpasses GPT 4 in speed and accuracy, and it can hold with up to 265K context window. So, and a knowledge cutoff of June 2024. So when it's released, I think somewhere in Q3, it has information up till June 2024. So that's a really cool next step. So it's bigger, faster, more, and better, and it has more up to date information. So they put it online, and they mistakenly put it online, so they put it back down. But hey, once it's online, it's online.
Mm-hmm.
But it's good to know that the next big version is coming, and that more relevant than the information that we have now.
Yeah. And just kind of to finish off the news segment, the EU has passed the AI Act. And its intention is to kind of regulate artificial intelligence. Now, obviously, some people have said it doesn't go far enough. Others have said it will actually put too many constraints on companies. But this is just the nature of legislation, to be fair. So, there's always going to be opposing views on it. But it does mark a kind of a big step forward in the kind of regulation of AI, especially given it is such a large area such as the EU. Ryan, what's your view on this one?
I think it's more targeted towards how it will interact with us in like personal data, health. So in some respects, I see why it's come out because if that sort of information got into an AI and was used, by a bad actor, as we use the phrase, then potentially the risks could be significant. But it's just building on all these other steps. So as I was talking before the recording, they released the standard 42001 in December 23, which talks about how you should, if you are building AI solutions or you're using AI solutions in your organization, you need to obviously handle how you handle risk, mitigate the risk, policy for how the company should operate and control that. So this is just an additional step to what's already out there. And as you know, ISO standards are a global thing. So if a company adopts it, it's applied. So this is just adding further weight into the kind of market. And considering what we've just discussed in the news snippets of robots walking on stage, robots packing your shopping, it's a little bit concerning if these things weren't in place, right?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I agree. So, Ryan, the reason we have you on is obviously you just wrote an article quite recently, which we're going to link in the show notes. It's about LLMs and hallucinations. So, obviously, before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about efficient ether?
Yeah, sure. So in June last year, I founded a company called Efficient Ether, which is around cost optimization and kind of efficiencies across everything as a service, so XaaS, as they call it, XaaS. So as we're moving to this subscription world, we're moving from perpetual licenses, which no one really likes, but tough, we have to, because that's how businesses are moving to the models. We're buying all these subscriptions and then we're becoming what I like to call subscription fatigue. There's all these subscriptions everywhere. How do we manage the cost? How do we track them all? And it becomes a bit of a problem. So what is set out, it was based on information as well from like Deloitte and for Gartner, where they were talking about some of the challenges approaching the industry with everything as a service and subscriptions. Building and built a platform which takes a look at all these different clouds and all these different subscriptions and tells you where the efficiencies are, tells you where to save, automatic instructions how to kind of make them savings, as well as a hell of a lot of AI in the background which orchestrates all of these good things. And just to kind of finish off the synopsis of Efficient Ether, a byproduct which was accidental initially was Ether Assist, which is the AI chatbot initially. The chatbot's the front end, the back end's much wider, and we'll talk about that with LLMs in a minute. For the IT pro, so out there they've got all these different chatbots, Copilot, which we can plug into Amazon Q. Everybody's spinning chatbots, but to have the ability to be specific for a particular area is not going to be handled by the main players. That's going to require companies like Efficient Ether to build that for them clientele, them bases of customers. So that's just basically where we're at. So it's a cost optimization, sustainability product where we're looking at helping organizations be the most efficient, most sustainable, and obviously reduce the costs, wrapped in with a humongous amount of AI, which is taking care of a lot of these tasks.
So you built your own model, did you?
We have things in the works. So we're using various different models. So, and we can talk about how you handle LLMs and correction. We're using multiple models. So the first one was the Azure OpenAI model, and then we were using a few open source ones which were out there as well. We're also using databases which we'll talk about, like Pinecone and Quadrant as well. And the thing is, everybody's now started to adopt RAG, and RAG has been around since 19, but it only kind of came in the public eye, the technical public eye, I should say, since, the last 6-7 months. So all this kind of technology which we're doing is very much at the latest stages, and not many people have really gone into that. So really, the sort of things.
Just for anyone who doesn't understand, what do you mean by RAG?
So augmented retrieval process. So effectively, rather than asking an LLM, which we mentioned earlier about model training dates, we're talking about GPT 4.5. So that's trained up to the latest date. When you're using a model or language, it doesn't necessarily have all the information, and this is where it gets a bit tricky. It starts guessing. So if it doesn't have that knowledge inside, it will make an assumption and make an educated guess, as we'll call it. And then you get the wrong information. Whereas if you connect into a data set of information, it could be either via functions, an API, or via a vector database, which is where augmented retrieval comes into it. You're more likely to get a more accurate response, effectively. So you put in chunks of documents and data, and it pulls through the output in a hopefully correct format. So that's pretty much how organizations are getting around a lot of these kind of inaccuracies with using language models. And just to be clear, though, everybody talks about AI. AI isn't just language models, and this is what frustrates me a lot. Is a lot of people talk about we're using AI. Well, if you're just using a language processing model, it isn't really AI as such. You're just using plain text language to process queries and simplify things. The wider picture, like machine learning and all these other things which are spinning up, is much wider. And bringing more of that together actually is an AI. Just using a language model is just using a language model, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we're going to talk a bit in a bit more depth, but obviously, we've all experienced this. You get AIs lie to you. It's called hallucinations, but essentially it's lying to you. So that is why there is all this disclaimers on every AI platform out there that some of the information conveyed may be factually untrue. So you've been looking a lot deeper at kind of hallucinations and the cause of hallucinations, given as you've built out your business.
Yeah, so there's a few things. So a lot of the bigger the model, the later the model, the more the cost associated. So a lot of organizations will choose for an older model. But to kind of keep the cost low, there's lots of different things you're going to handle. But obviously, if you go for a newer model, the hallucinations might be slightly less. There's all these various different things in there. Also about consistency as well. One of the things which frustrates me is if you ask a question, you always want to get a reproducible output, if I can say it properly. And unfortunately, with a lot of base LLM models, you just get a different answer each time, or similar, but not exactly the same. And that creates cause for concern. So well, we've used various different models, but the problem is when you're using various models as well, every time you jump to a different model, you then have to redo prompts. Because the responses and the communication between models is very different too. So there's this whole kind of ecosystem of different things you need to be aware of. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back a few steps and we can work our way through it, if that makes sense. Yeah, due to our accidental cutoff, we were going to go back a few steps and kind of build out the story of
exactly.
how you get to these situations.
If you start
basically, when we look at taking, so in AVD Tech Fest, I did an example last year. It was an example of using an LLM to query error codes and also write markdown files as like knowledge base articles. So every time you're using PowerShell, you would ask, it's all on GitHub. I'll share the link later so you can still download that now today and use it. But effectively what it would do is you get an error from AVD or from anything you're using in PowerShell. It would identify what that error was, and it would also then create you a KB of how to resolve it. And you could also use that to also ask it questions about other errors. And it'd also then, for example, if you had an application error or a service error, it would basically spit out and tell you what you needed to do. And create you the KB to go with it so you can insert that into your documentation. So it was just a very basic an LLM kind of using a model just to pull through, and that was just using Azure OpenAI in its infinite form. But the problem with that is your data only goes up to 2021 or 2023, depending on what model you're using, and that has a kind of bit of a detrimental effect. A lot of if you can preload, so what I did is I had a JSON file as well with preloaded information, all these error codes for FS logics and things, and I'd feed the AI that first, and then from a prompt, and then from my question, I'd get better responses. But that isn't still great because you're still burning tokens and kind of feeding it information from the get-go. So using an LLM natively does have a number of inherent risks. Then when you look at training, so we've just got a basic LLM and we're going to train it with some information. When you train something, it has a cost associated with it. As you know, I call it fine tuning. And fine tuning on its own, and we'll come back to this, isn't really the answer either, because you're going to spend a lot of money, but you're still going to get hallucinations. So the only real way to dip in and dip out of content rather than pushing prompts every 10 minutes is to use a vector database or a data source of some sort. And obviously what it does is it actually talks to the database and pulls out the kind of the scored highest topics and content for that particular question you require answering, for like, what is the difference between AVD and cloud PC, which is the burning question most people ask today, even though we've already had the answer. And it'll go through and it'll pull out the relevant information and it'll build the answer. And that's a really good way of using it. And it's a much more affordable because you're not using as many prompts, as many responses, and many tokens to generate that output. Then the problem you've got is about context, about you're asking a specific question. It might find AVD, but it might come up with something completely different, which is not the topic of Azure Virtual Desktop. It could talk about Android Virtual Desktop, which doesn't really exist.
Like when you put in EUC into Google and it comes up with something about unicycles, not end user computing.
and this is the issue, right? So without the context, you're unable to actually achieve the objective of getting the right output. So there's all these different elements in there. And let me talk about something which Mr. Cooperman, Adam Cooperman, raised to me a few months ago at an EUC event in London. And he was talking about MAD. And it wasn't mad cow disease. It was an issue regarding feeding an AI information. So continually feeding it. So you can't generate information from AI and then feed it to the AI, because effectively what happens, and there's some really good papers on it, which my article talks about as well, is where it effectively eats itself over a period of time, because the information you're giving it is just AI information.
Inception.
And it's a really good
some kind of Inception.
Yeah, and I love how they've actually named it similar to mad cow disease, because the same biological effect happened there, where they were feeding the cow and it's modifying.
Oh, they're feeding them the infected meat, weren't they? Or
and
exactly.
all of these problems span out from that, and obviously now
it makes sense.
And it's the same concept in AI. So the only way you'll ever achieve success with the AI using like RAG technology and content is to have your unique and clean data. If you ever contaminate the data, it will be no use to you, and that's a very important part. So the hallucinations will ramp up significantly if you start. Well, it won't be hallucinations; it'll just be pulling of incorrect data, because it just doesn't. It doesn't compute. It doesn't make sense. So that was the other thing. And then obviously, the thing is with data and topics is for every bit of data, you need to set context. So if you just have a generic prompt and ask it, I need you to act as a chef in Switzerland for a particular burger, but then you're going to ask it about making a potato salad in France, it's going to have no idea how to kind of handle that. So if you're going to ask it questions about potato salad, you need to flip it over to a different prompt and answer, and using that sort of capability to answer that question. So there's all these different things in there. There's also something, and RAG on its own still isn't good enough, right? You're still going to get issues with RAG. So there's also something called CRAG, which is basically corrective retrieval augmentation. And this is another paper which came out not too long ago. A lot of these papers are coming out every couple of months. It's amazing the kind of community and industry are pushing out all of this kind of research. And CRAG basically is like a second layer of checking. So not only does it pull through the output from RAG and the answer to the question, it then goes off to the internet or whatever you've set it to do, and it will then validate the answer again on there. So you kind of improving that. And then also there's something called user-initiated iterative refinement. So if you're not happy with the answer and you mark it as a bad answer, for example, or say it's a bad answer, what it can do then is go and then reconfirm. And believe it or not, with a lot of LLM technology, if you say that answer is complete rubbish, go and provide me another response. The second answer usually comes back with the correct answer or near as. So there's like, it's not just a case of deploying an LLM. There's like 10 or 11 steps to handle all of the either wrong data or hallucinations. And you might argue that it's lying to you, or it's wrong, or it's biased or whatever. But it's a hallucination is just basically its inability to answer the question correctly, because there's something which is preventing it from doing that. And there's also some additional things in there, and one of the most simplest ways is something called human in a loop, which effectively means that you can't possibly rely on the AI to make a decision without your approval. And this is why the kind of like initiated refinement of saying that's wrong does require humans. So what I'm saying is, in AI, regardless of what it outputs, you don't want to be sat in that passenger seat while that car's driving, because you still need to make decisions as a human, because at the end of the day, it's your life, not the car's. Well, it is the car's, but it's not, it doesn't exist. But and this is where it comes back. So what everybody says about the, let's say we pick on a chatbot, it's still your responsibility to identify whether that answer meets the requirements or not. It's not, the AI cannot be blamed for the output, because A, it's how you ask the question, and B, it's your requirement to ensure that that is a valid response. If you don't know, then really that's on you anyway, in the sense that you need to go and double check that, if that makes sense. And there's
of course the input data needs to be correct. Exactly. If you put the information that's garbage in is garbage out. So that's also
and
one
there was
of the key elements.
It was illegal. So someone used it in law, which is a bad idea straight away, because unless you've been to law school, or you're actually a qualified barrister, you kind of like back at the wrong tree. But they took a lot of case law and they just roll with it, and it was all wrong. And then they got to court, and the judge was like, "Well, that doesn't exist. That doesn't exist." And it's a prime example of what you shouldn't do. Obviously, if there's a RAG in there and there's CRAG in there, then that case law would have been verified and the answers would have been probably more likely correct. But there wasn't. They just went off on thinking this language model was able to give you perfect examples, and it cannot. It's just a language model. It just basically processes things in language.
Yeah. So what you're highlighting there is the importance of the prompt you give the LLM to start with.
Yeah, so it's just like writing code, essentially. So if you've got, if I just say, what's this error code? And I don't give it any context for this is for Windows or Linux, or build out that story of context, then what happens is you're going to get the wrong answer, because A, you're being lazy and you're not giving the required information, and you're not building that story for it to answer it properly. And everything you use with an AI is you're effectively building a story, right? You're going to, I've got this situation, I need you to help me answer it. Whatever happens in the background can speed up and reduce the amount of story you need to provide, but you as the human input still need to make sure that you give very clear instructions of what you want. And that's just the principle. What I will say is, I believe the development world, and maybe in other areas of the IT industry as well, will see prompt engineering appear on more and more job descriptions as we go along, because it won't just be that the developers writing prompts, it could be the IT pro asking them questions to refine that as well. So,
or even the users.
I know we've never seen Google on a CV before. Do you know how to Google things properly? But there is that joke linked in how to Google something. But obviously with AI, it's going to be obviously a requirement.
It's going to be how to write a prompt or something, or a prompt generator type thing.
Yeah, being able to provide the correct context to kind of achieve the right outcome is pretty much where I think we're going. And there's all these other things as well, like cross-model validation as well. And the problem with cross-model validation is that the prompt might not be sufficient for that cross-model. So you then need to handle how you would then verify if it doesn't give you the same outputs across the different models.
Yeah, because I've done that where I've used one AI and then switched to another and got various different components that is said, they would be the same answer. So, but yeah, as you said, you have to determine how you're going to kind of go through that process.
Essentially, yeah. So it's not it's not kind of clean cut. But there's other things as well, like function calling, and something which we've been working quite a lot on is the ability to instruct to carry out specific actions. with an approval process as well. So function calling is good in the sense that you can say, hey, what's the weather? And it'll go and talk to the weather Met Office and pull through all of the information for the weather for that week. And then you can say, hey, I want that in a table, or I want that in a markdown file, or whatever format, a CSV even, and the language model will easily handle that data for you and make it look nice and pretty. And that's the sort of things. But for obviously like what we're doing at Efficient Ether, it's going to be no hidden secret that we'll be able to orchestrate and carry out actions on clouds very quickly to achieve them objectives using that language model. In a controlled manner, obviously, not like
exactly. That's what it comes back to. Is you still want, don't go empty this server of all users just because that's more efficient. Do consult me and ask before you implement this. Yeah, because this is, if you think about how an AI works, obviously it sort of look at the most efficient way. And what's the most efficient way for a multi-user server to run? Kick the users off. But of course, that's completely impractical.
This is why context is so important, because if you are not proactive enough, I don't want to use the word lazy, but proactive enough to set out clear instructions, then unless there's safeguards in place, which there will be, and there is, then you're going to cause a lot of pain. And so for all them organizations who are starting the journey in AI today, you need to be looking at not what it can do, but not what you want it to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no. And as you said, lots, most organizations are looking at AI in some contexts, and some are completely unaware of how to utilize it and, the potential it has, but also the consequences. I've heard of numerous companies uploading, if you look at the fine print on ChatGPT, it says if you upload anything to it, they own it. So, and they can train their model with it. So don't be uploading NDA data into ChatGPT or any open AI source. So think, the same way you wouldn't upload anything to the internet without thinking about it. Don't do it with a chatbot. So.
Yeah, and this is why obviously like placement as well. So I know that Copilot's come out for specifics, but a lot of organizations are banning ChatGPT because they're concerned about the inherent risks associated with it. Obviously, ChatGPT or OpenAI has entered the enterprise market, right? They've released the enterprise version, which you've got to pay a hefty sums for. But again, still, with what's gone on with that company and some of the concerns, me personally, I would be thinking twice. Would I really want to kind of push my data in there? And that's obviously why we went towards, Azure and open models, because of the risks inherent with that. You want the data stays where the data stays now. It doesn't go anywhere else. It's processed locally and it's secure. Because like you said, if someone gets hold of information, which could be sensitive or personal, and then you train on it, and someone says, hey, on ChatGPT, do you know this person? And it starts printing out all the information about that person. It's a little bit concerning, right?
Yeah, and exactly. And in your case, while you are making other companies' clouds more efficient, if that data comes into the wrong hands, people know a lot about the company's cloud usage and what they have and where they store it. So that's relatively no-go. And Microsoft has, I read a Swiss accountancy firm, a Swiss firm that legislation firm. They did a check about all the different AI companies and how they do their due diligence, and the Microsoft one sucks the less. So it was the best of the worst. So their conclusion was, if you want to do something in the cloud and you want to use AI, please use the Microsoft Copilot and Azure AI services. Because of what you said, the information barriers and everything that they put in your tenant stays in your tenant, is not used to train models or whatever. So, and if the Swiss say it's true, then it must be true.
Precision.
Exactly.
I did notice that Groot, correct me if I'm wrong, but Groot's released an OpenAI version, but you need a massive GPU for that. And I also believe Apple are working, rumor has it, Apple are working on a model as well. You can find that from Apple's GitHub page. There's something called AIX Learn, and there's 11 papers on a model. So something's coming there. But I think what really organizations should be probably considering, if they're serious about AI, would be to have multiple models, because again, you don't want to put your eggs in one basket, and also the inherent risks of what are going on. But I'll be honest with you, unless the costs come down, which I believe the NLP chips are going to do and offload, then it's not going to be affordable in mainstream. Also, from a sustainability perspective, AI is going to be a significant punch to the stomach for a lot of companies and organizations
Well,
from a
yeah.
carbon credits
Yeah,
perspective.
well, if you think about the sustainability thing, like, we already have so many data centers. Like, if I talk about Ireland, we've actually stopped data centers because of it's not just sustainability, more to do with our energy grid and how it can absolutely overload it if they. And I always think about this, and it's like, okay, yeah, let's let these AI operators open data centers, but they have to have their own energy source, whether that's renewables or whatever way. But they can't be plugging into the grid, and and that's what's happening. Like, that's why we have put a stop on them here, is because it's a threat to our grid.
So, interestingly, from the research we've been doing at Efficient Ether, the top three places in Azure regions is Switzerland, Canada, and US West Coast. For the most efficient, I mean, we're talking, it is like minuscule compared to Europe and all these other places, obviously minus Switzerland. But, I think Canada is near off zero on its emissions. It literally negates. So if you were to deploy your AI and things into them sort of regions, you would actually be promoting a more sustainable approach to that at this current time, because in the UK the emissions are significantly high. So if I was to deploy my resources in the UK, I would obviously consciously be burning a bigger carbon footprint than I would be if I deployed it in the US per se. So there's all of these things to take into consideration as well. But
Yeah.
Interesting data, really.
Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't have thought, like, the US would be more efficient than Europe.
You wouldn't, would you? But they are, yeah.
Yeah,
Especially the
no.
hydroelectric,
It's an interesting thing to hear. Swiss, obviously, yeah, but the Canadians, but yeah, okay. Well, that's good to know.
That does leave you with a little bit of regulation issues if you deploy your AI in the US and the Americans can, through Patriot Act or what's the new one called, can get to your data because it's stored in America. Then you have those issues again. So the Swiss one for Europe should be the safest one to deploy to.
Yeah, I mean, the argument with Azure OpenAI is, does the AI store the data unless you fine tune it, which is actually a good point I didn't come to, is if you use all of the components I've mentioned already and then fine tune, you're going to achieve a much higher success rate with your responses. It's not just using one or two of them, it's using all of them, synchronously together. But Azure OpenAI, from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, processes the data, but it doesn't store it as such. So the data is yours. So if you are using the AI API but storing in another region, obviously there's latency and concerns around there to handle, but potentially you still should be okay.
Okay.
But that should be a consideration for those. But if you are caching and storing data, like you said in the US, you've got the Patriot Act, which is quite an aggressive act, if I'm honest with you, compared to some other countries. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's been a really good overview, Ryan. So I'd like to thank you for coming on. Gershon, am I right in saying you're going to be presenting on Azure OpenAI pretty soon?
Yeah, we're going to meet each other next week on EUC Forum in London, where I'm going to talk about the different AI services and how you can use them to your advantage. So, Ryan, I'm not sure, are you going to be there?
I am indeed, and I look forward to it. I've booked myself a seat for that one.
Awesome. So then you can help me.
He's going to be at the front asking you difficult questions. That's where Ryan's going to be.
Yeah, together with James, I'm assuming. James, you're also going to be there? Yeah, so that's going to be awesome.
As long as James doesn't do any more surprise videos of me, I'll be fine.
All right. Ryan, thanks very much for your time. We will be back next month. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.